Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Mark Chase. I'm the other Mark from Oakland. And my pronouns are he, him, and his. After spending my 20s as a San Francisco-based flight attendant, I came to the realization that I was going to have to find a more lucrative career if I wished to stay in the Bay Area. After years of having my workspace consist of large aircraft, glamorous and not so glamorous destinations, the smell of Panda Express mixed with jet fuel in the morning, and in the later years of my career, defensive training to defend the flight deck against terrorists, it was time to hang up my wings. So what kind of a job was I suited for? I knew I did not want a typical 9-to-5 Monday through Friday type career. I lived such a non-traditional life for so long that it seemed foolish to start now. I like helping people, and I had years of customer service experience. Quite by accident, I came across a job posting for a 911 dispatcher position. I was a little daunted by the job description, but I figured I would give it a shot. How hard could it be? After nearly a year of repeated tasks, interviews, an in-depth background investigation, a polygraph examination, a psychological examination, and a medical examination, I was finally hired by a Bay Area law enforcement agency. The first few weeks of training were in a classroom. 4 of us trainees huddled together and tried to decipher the foreign language of penal code, 10 code, police slang, and the somewhat inappropriate sense of humor that pervaded the entire experience. "What does 1026 mean again?" one of my classmates asked. "It means the person is clear of wants or warrants," the instructor explained. I remember thinking to myself, but what is a warrant? In time, I would come to know that a warrant is a legal document issued by a government official, usually a judge, to be able to arrest someone or to execute a search of someone's property. However, those first few weeks of training, I was definitely a fish out of water. Another thing that I would come to learn much later is that the success rate of training people in the 911 dispatch profession and in law enforcement in general is very low. When I was hired in the profession 15 years ago, the average pass rate for a dispatcher in training was 1 out of 3 people. Today, it's closer to 1 out of every 4 or 5 people being able to pass probation successfully. It's a tough job that requires strength of character, mental toughness, the ability to tolerate sitting or standing in one room for 40 to 60 hours per week, and the ability to navigate close quarters with many of your coworkers who are often suffering from some level of PTSD. Listening to call after call with sometimes limited opportunities to find out the outcome can be very difficult for people. If you work at a large dispatch center like the California Highway Patrol, whose Golden Gate Center is in Vallejo, you might never even meet the officers you're dispatching for because they're spread throughout the Bay Area and sometimes hours away. One of the most important attributes for someone answering 911 calls is that you must be unflappable and ready for the unexpected. The author Jeanette Wells wrote in her book, The Glass Castle, "Sometimes you need a little crisis to get your adrenaline flowing and to help you realize your potential." You must be able to quickly obtain information from a person, act on that information, start help, and then continue asking questions, all while sounding confident in what is called command presence. If you have to guide someone gently but firmly through doing CPR on a relative that needs it, it takes a deft balance. On one hand, you need to reassure the person that help is on the way and these steps are necessary. On the other hand, you have to keep control of the call and keep the person focused so they don't panic. Early CPR delivery is an important factor in being able to resuscitate someone if they've passed away. I remember early on in my dispatch career, I was not as effective as I am today because I was horribly nervous. I did not understand the rhythm and flow of information. I did not have the verbal communication skills or the familiarity with the job that I do today. When I was in training and I took a call of an armed robbery that had gone bad with a person shot, I froze. I was terrified. My trainer jumped onto the call, dispatched police, had me call for an ambulance, and handled the situation like a professional. Afterwards, she told me I had done fine. "That was a tough call," she said, before nonchalantly returning to her salad. I had to take a break. I walked outside and seriously considered taking up cigarette smoking. What had I gotten myself into? What I failed to realize that my primary job was to get help started, especially in an emergency situation like a car accident with injuries or a physical fight, calm the person down, obtain the information I needed to for my responders, and move on. The person who's on hold with their sewer backed up does not understand that you, the dispatcher, have just gotten off a call where someone has been shot. That person is angry because they've been on hold for over 3 minutes. So emotionally, you need to be able to quickly shift gears and adjust your style. You cannot take things personally because you quickly realize that whatever the caller is experiencing, it's not about you. Most of the time, if you're calling 911, it's not a good day. When people are very angry or in crisis, they often argue with you. The normal human reaction is to return that same level of energy. If someone shouts at you, then the expected reaction is often for you to yell back. As a 911 dispatcher, you do not have the luxury of being able to get in a shouting match with someone. Oftentimes, these people are yelling for other reasons. Again, it isn't personal. So one technique that we use is letting the person yell until they tire out. I suspect some parents may have some familiarity with this technique. When someone is insistent and keeps interrupting you, we let them continue and do not respond until they finally respond, "Well, aren't you going to say anything?" At which point you can both take a breath and try and resume a normal conversation. The hope of the dispatcher is that you will gain some control of the caller and be able to extract the information that you need to provide the responding units. In the same way, this is a practical skill that we all might use. When you see something on social media that infuriates you, let it go. Don't respond. The person that is posting the upsetting material wants a reaction. If you cannot remain civil and rational, do not respond. It just gets you sucked into the tornado of chaos and takes away any peace that you might be trying to preserve for your own sanity and well-being. Another technique that I was taught by a meditation teacher was to identify one's emotions in a moment of crisis or anxiety, and rather than be consumed by them, simply take a breath, identify the emotion, and examine why you're reacting this way. I like to refer to it as the sidestep technique. It takes a lot of patience and self-awareness and some practice. Rather than reacting immediately, simply sidestep the reaction, take a breath, and consciously identify what's occurring. In my case, a citizen's upset and yelling at me right now, and I'm very uncomfortable. I am tense in my shoulders and in my neck, and my stomach is cold and hard. I've lost my appetite. This is fear. I'm afraid of the emotion that she's displaying. That's interesting. Once you can locate your breath and identify intellectually what is happening, it often prevents panicking and reacting in a way that you will regret later. You can control your reactions and respond in an appropriate manner. Personally, one thing that has sustained me through this work is gratitude. It is important for all of us to remember how fortunate we are to live where we live, to treasure our good health, and to empathize with some of the struggles that others are facing. I receive calls from children who are numb from the physical and mental abuse that they have received at the hands of their parents or caregivers. I receive calls from transient men and women on cold winter nights begging me for some type of shelter bed that does not exist. I took calls for many years from the same woman, usually several times a night, who was convinced that there were men on her roof pumping toxic gas into her home, trying to kill her. As the effects of dementia progressed, she then began to call in her husband of over 50 years as a strange man who had broken into her home. I have taken calls from parents whose children have committed suicide in their homes. The pain and anguish in their voices is almost unbearable. But as the one person who is sending them help on the other end of the phone, you cannot fall apart in that moment. Once help has arrived, then you can disconnect and hopefully, if the phones aren't still ringing, which they usually are, take a break to decompress. However, in the moment, you have to hold it together and reassure them that they are doing a good job for their loved one. The underlying lesson that I take home each day after work is that I have very few problems. Is my life perfect? Far from it. However, the issues that I face in my daily life are trivial in comparison with the burdens that many other people face on a daily basis. I'm grateful that I was raised in a stable and loving home, that I grew up to be a caring and responsible man, and that I'm able to use my talents to serve the communities that I work for. I'm grateful to have a home, a car, a comfortable bed, a shower, and a loving husband to come home to. I no longer sweat the small stuff. The final lesson I have to impart to you today is that you must listen to your body and react accordingly. If your body is fatigued, then you need to attend to it. Make sure you're getting enough rest each evening and staying hydrated. Dispatchers have notoriously bad work and sleep schedules and horrible diets. The lack of self-care in our profession is significant. So as you go about your daily life, take that break if you need it. Go to an acupuncturist or a chiropractor if you need it. Go for a walk on your lunch hour. If you're undergoing mental anxiety, find out what that's all about. Seek out for professional help. Suicide rates amongst dispatchers and police officers are high. 2 retired San Jose police officers took their own lives just this year. Oftentimes, people carry around the burdens of what they see and hear with them and are afraid to ask for help. In a 2018 survey of police officers in New York by the Fraternal Order of Police, 61% of officers admitted that they are haunted by memories of previous calls. Dispatchers, I would argue it's a similar statistic. 16% admitted to having suicidal thoughts, and 15% admitted to having substance abuse issues. So if you are having difficulty, reach out to those around you. Be honest about the struggles that you are facing and ask for help. Listen to what your body is telling you and give it the care that it needs. Laugh whenever you can. Celebrate your successes even when they are small and may seem insignificant. It isn't selfish, it's self-care. My friends, these are tough times. The headlines each day are grim. However, it is up to each one of us to be the support for one another and to reinforce the good that exists in the world. So be patient and be kind to yourself and to others. Let that person who arrived at the shopping carts just before you grab one. Smile and genuinely inquire about how a person's day is going and be willing to listen if they're struggling. Recognize the spark of the divine that lives in each one of us, even in those whom we might struggle to see it in. Don't hit send on that sarcastic post or text message, even though you really want to do so. Be the good you wish to see in the world rather than the bad we see on TV and on the internet each day. I hope you've enjoyed hearing something about my life and my career. Thank you to all of you for being a positive example each and every day of the good that exists in the world. I'm consistently grateful for this wonderful church that we're fortunate to call home.